What I'm going to do is I'm going to ask the congregation to make a decision between this thing and that thing. We're going to do the hand raise for this one or that one. You're going to look around and see which is the thing, you know, which way you should go. And then we're going to ask you which one you choose. And then we'll decide as a congregation. So this is for the congregation. Meat pie. Now listen, imagine this is what's happening. This is what happens with peer pressure. Peer pressure's even made some people follow the Newcastle Knights. So imagine you're at a Newcastle Knights game, the Knights are on 14, the Canberra Raiders 37, and you need a bit of comfort food. So you go down to the food stall and you've got to choose between meat pie or sausage roll. So let's go to the next one. Thanks, Neville. I've never seen bogan meat pies in this shop, but I really am glad we've got them. And the next slide, thanks, Neville, or sausage roll. So let's go back and forwards. Meat pie, sausage roll. Okay, meat pie people, put your hand up. Absolutely, every day. Sausage roll people, put your hand up.
The sausage roll's the poor cousin of the meat pie.
Amber, you have to choose one. Sausage roll. Oh! She survived the peer pressure test. Well, now, that's okay. That means that you're not going to be a Newcastle Knights fan, because that was my greatest fear for you. The third and last question. This is the meaning of life. This is the really deepest question that we ever get asked in Australia. I've actually asked it here from the pulpit once or twice. So let's go to the next slide. Thanks, Neville. Amber, pineapple on pizza, yes or no? So your answer is no? Is that your answer? Is she right or is she wrong? So we've asked Neville. This is a picture I took of Neville at a Newcastle Knights game. He's a level Neville, we call him. He's the most level-headed man in the congregation. And so he knows about pineapple on pizza, and he's with Amber on this one. Before we go to the next one, we got one more slide. When you land in Australia, you've got to speak the lingo. I mean, I've had to tell her what a pushy is. How do you not know what a pushy is? She doesn't understand about onions or sausages first on a Bunnings sausage sanger. Do you know what a sanger is? Oh, she does. Good. What I've got for you is a book that came out in 1965. And this guy, whose name is Afbek Lauder, and he said, you guys don't speak English, you speak Strine. Now, I went looking up to find a copy of this book, Let's Talk Strine. And I found one for sale in a bookshop in New York for about $150. Who'd have thought they'd see the real value of Australian literature in America? So I bought it. Not the $150 one.
$150 US, it's about 3,000.
So when you start reading it, you'll think that things are weirder than I've really made out to be. But we will get back to sausages, meat pies, and books about how we speak in Australia. We're going to go to the other one, thanks, Neville. Let's go back to up to Paul's journey. So here we are. A foreigner goes trekking off to a foreign country, and he lands there and gets into strife. So you can see up the top there's Thessalonica, where he got kicked out last week. He got kicked out of Thessalonica and then went down to Berea, and he was welcome at Berea. And that's where people examined the word. But then the people up at the Thessalonica said, hey, he's down there at Berea. So they sent a bunch of rabble-rousers down, and they took Paul down to Athens. Now, if you want to follow on, if you like following on in your phone, there's the thing there. It's Acts chapter 17, 16 to 34. I'll read it to you here. I was going to put this on the PowerPoint, but my PowerPoint skills have fallen off since I finished up at work, and I just could not get long passages to format properly. It just went all over the place. So here we go. This is Paul in Athens. While Paul was waiting for them in Athens, he was greatly distressed to see that the city was full of idols. So he reasoned in the synagogue with both Jews and God-fearing Greeks, as well as in the marketplace day by day with those who happened to be there. A group of Epicurean and Stoic philosophers began to debate with him. Can we have the next slide? Thanks, Neville. We're just going to break for a minute. So a group of Epicurean and Stoic philosophers began to debate. What I've got here is just a bit of an idea, the difference between Epicureanism and Stoicism. So the Epicureans, if we try and encapsulate it, it's a bit of a cliche. Life is short and brutal. Seek pleasure where it is to be found. There's a magazine in Australia called The Epicurean, and it's all about fine food and dining and fancy champagne. And when my brother had a fancy restaurant up in the Hunter Valley, well, he got written up in Epicurean magazine. I never have because I don't cook that good. But that's the Epicureans. The Stoic is the stiff upper lip. Life is short and brutal. Take the blows of life on the chin and see it through. So these are the people, and both these philosophies were sort of widespread through that world in the time of Paul. And they would debate. Obviously, they've got no job to go to, these guys. Some of them asked, what is this babbler trying to say? Others remarked, he seems to be advocating foreign gods. They said this because Paul was preaching the good news about Jesus and the resurrection. Then they took him and brought him to a meeting of the Areopagus. Next slide, thanks, Neville. Just in case you think the Areopagus is one of those funny animals on Sesame Street. The Areopagus, which is also called Mars Hill, depends on whether you want a Roman or the Greek term, and Ares is the Greek name for Mars. You can see that in the beginning there. This is the hill overlooking the city where officials would meet. And if you look, you can look up the Greek myth about, Mars, the god Mars being judged on the top of this hill by the other sort of, all the Roman gods and stuff. But it also became known as the council. So that was the place and also the name of the council for civic matters. So we'll go back to here. You can just go on to the next blank slide. Thanks, Neville. We'll just hold that for a while. So they took him and brought him to a meeting of the Areopagus. And they said to him, may we know what this new teaching is that you are presenting? Now, this is all the civil heads of the city. You are bringing some strange ideas to our ears, and we would like to know what they mean. All the Athenians and the foreigners who lived there spent their time doing nothing but talking about and listening to the latest ideas. It sounds like people sitting in the park up there outside of Market Town, where everybody sits there through the day. And all the Athenians and foreigners did nothing but talking about and listening to the latest ideas. Paul stood up at the meeting of the Areopagus and he said, people of Athens, I see that in every way you are very religious. For as I walked around and looked carefully at the objects of worship, I even found an altar with this inscription, to an unknown God. So you are ignorant of the very thing you worship. And this is what I am going to proclaim to you. The God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth and does not live in temples built by human hands. And he is not served by human hands as if he needed anything. Rather, he himself gives everyone life and breath and everything else. From one man he made all the nations, that they should inhabit the whole earth. And he marked out their appointed times in history and the boundaries of their lands. God did this so that they would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he is not far from any of us. For in him we live and move and have our being. As some of your own poets have said, we are his offspring. Therefore, since we are God's offspring, we should not think that the divine being is like silver or gold or silver or stone, an image made by human design and skill. In the past, God overlooked such ignorance, but now he commands all people everywhere to repent. For he has set a day when he will judge the world with justice by the man he has appointed. He has given proof of this to everyone by raising him from the dead. When they heard about the resurrection of the dead, some of them sneered, but others said, "We want to hear you again on this subject." At that, Paul left the council. Some of the people became followers of Paul and believed. Among them was Dionysius, a member of the Areopagus, also a woman named Damaris, and a number of others. Paul's normal practice was to go to the synagogue and to speak with the Jewish residents of the towns he visited. And that's how he started off in Athens. But he also went to the marketplace because he knew that there would be non-Jewish residents there. And that's where he meets the exponents of these two philosophies, the Epicureans and the Stoics. Now, we put up a simple sort of resume of the difference between each of those, and they look very different. But if we take a deeper look, something very interesting emerges. The Epicureans believed that we should live a life by avoiding pain and seeking things that bring us pleasure and satisfaction. They knew that we've got basic needs like food and water and shelter. We also need companionship, care for others. But if these needs are taken too far, then we find ourselves chasing after luxuries and fast cars and expensive champagne and things with diamonds on them. But the Epicurean says that these things only pretend to bring pleasure. I've driven a Lamborghini and a Ferrari, well, not a Ferrari, a McLaren, and I tell you what, they do bring you pleasure. You should try it. I've got a lot of things with diamonds on them, though. The Epicurean says that these things only pretend to bring pleasure. They are pleasurable for a time, but they leave us wanting just a little bit more and just a little bit more and then just a little bit more and on and on. And so we see the most wealthy people in the world are doing exactly that. The Epicureans tried to walk the line of seeking after a life that is pleasurable, but also fulfilling and satisfying, and importantly, open to everyone. They knew that there would be rich people who could afford all the luxuries, but that is not life for the normal person. And the rich would also be better people if they limited their greed back to their need. The Stoics, on the other hand, they said that there are things we can control and things we can't control. We can't control the storms of life that come our way, but we can control our reaction to them. And for this reason, we have to distance ourselves from feelings of control and feelings of desire and the inner drive to get more stuff and have more power and think we can live a life of ease where nothing ever blows us off course. We do that by limiting desire, by recognizing that a simple life is better than a life filled with clutter. If we limit our expectations, then life becomes more satisfying. The Epicurean said that we should limit pain and pursue attainable pleasures. The Stoics said that pain and pleasure don't matter and that the virtuous life is found by distancing ourselves from both of them. Both philosophies aim at living a satisfying life that is free of pain as possible. Neither of them recognized any God or divine being, but they both promoted virtue and justice. Both of them valued human life, and both of them tried to encourage people to live separate from their circumstances. It's interesting that when Paul quotes that phrase, "In him we live and move and have our being," the word move there is not about when we're walking around. It's not as if we sort of have our life. The word move is actually the things that move us emotionally. We're moved to tears, we're moved to anger, we're moved to some emotional state. And this, of course, goes directly against what both the Epicureans and the Stoics are suggesting, that we shouldn't be moved by life. And Paul says in God, we move. We have an emotional reaction to things. And now we get back to Paul. The philosophers are up on Mars Hill, and the important matters are decided, and they've got all the officials there, and they've invited Paul to explain what he's preaching about. So Paul stands up and he says, "Men of Athens, you guys need to stop arguing about meat pies and sausage rolls." Well, that's not how he says it, but that's the situation. Who hasn't ever bought a chunky beef pie and found you got all the tough bits? Who hasn't bit into a sausage roll and then you think, this has been too long in the warmer oven and it's like biting into a bullet? It doesn't matter what it's called or what the shape of the pastry is, it's still just pastry wrapped around filling. Life sometimes gives us tough times. And what do we do in those moments? That's the basic thought underneath these two philosophies. Life is tough. Tougher than a meat pie, I can tell you. Life is tough, so we either find some pleasure in it or we hold it at arm's length and we tough it out. One of the conversations I had this morning was with Howard, and I said, "How you going?" And he said, "Well, things looking pretty tough. He's just looking at the next 6-month journey of moving into the new building, of architects and approvals and design and building the kitchen and all that." And he said, "But that's what makes it exciting." Life sometimes gives us tough times. And that's the basic thought underneath these two philosophies, how we deal with it. So Paul says to the Epicureans and the Stoics, you guys are like people at the footy. When your team is losing, you go down to the food stall to some comfort food and you've got to choose either a pie or a sausage roll. Your philosophies are merely taking the same stuff, the inner core, the tough meat of life, and you're wrapping it in different shaped pastry. Very good. That's all you're doing up on Mars Hill, spending all their day talking about sausage rolls and meat pies. Epicurean pastry makes a meat pie. Stoic pastry makes a sausage roll. In the end, what difference does it make?
That's good, mate. Very good.
We're going to go somewhere else now. Let's go to jail. And most of you know, I think, that I retired a while back from 20 years of being a prison chaplain. So here's an example of some of the conversations that I'm likely to have walking around in workshops. You wonder what people do in jail? Well, most of them go to workshops and they do stuff. So next time you go to a motel and you make a cup of tea, well, that kettle might have actually come from Bathurst Jail. And this is how it happens. Bathurst Jail is a workshop and they do electric kettle checking. So imagine a guy buys a wife, he buys a... You can imagine he buys a wife for his kettle, but let's imagine he also buys a kettle for his wife. It's Mother's Day. It's Mother's Day, so he goes in Harvey Norman and he buys an electric kettle and she takes it back, which is... And that, ladies, is what you must always do the week after Mother's Day. Even if he buys you a cordless drill, you take it back, no matter how much he wants to use it. So it goes back to Harvey Norman, and it goes back to the supplier because it's a return, and even though it might never have been used, and she's already swapped the money on a little gold bracelet, and then it gets put on a pallet and they go out to Bathurst Jail. Many of them are brand new in the box. Sometimes there's a very old, very dead kettle in the new box. Somebody returned the old one and got a refund for their new purchase just because they had last week's docket. It happens. So here's Kim, the chaplain. Now I've just given Rick a brand new idea. So here's Kim, the chaplain. He walks through a workshop and there's a bunch of guys around the table and they've got a pallet load of electric kettles and they take them out and they check them and some of them are damaged and they just put in the damage pile, and some can be repaired by a part off another one. So everyone that goes back to the supplier that's working, well, they get $2.50 for the jail, and everyone that goes back to the supply that doesn't work, they get paid 50 cents or $1 or something for looking at it. That's how the workshop goes. So I walk up to these the table full of people. Imagine this table here, working on the electric kettles. So how are things going, guys? And one guy says, well, okay, considering we're already wasting time on these things day after day. 4 years I'm in for so far, 1 year gone. How are you managing the boring days? I say. And the guy says, not bad. We pull a new kettle out of the box. We say to each other, here's another bloke who doesn't know how to buy his wife something decent for Mother's Day. So we give him a name. And we make up some crazy story about him trying to think what his wife might like, but he just can't do it. And we joke about what he really wanted to get her was a cordless drill, but they were out of stock. Some men are idiots, but they're funny. And then we pull the next one out of the box, and it's 10 years old and totally stuffed in a brand new box. So we know that someone just ripped off Harvey Norman by getting a refund on a dead kettle. That gives us a bit of a laugh. So that's one conversation. And then I go to the next bench in the workshop. And here's what you didn't know. Canbrook power boards are assembled in a prison workshop down at Junee. 5 or 6 guys around the table. One cuts a length of cord and strips the insulation off the ends. The next guy fixes the cord into a plug, passes it on. 2 guys are assembling the box with all the outlets. Another guy fixes the cord into the outlet box. Someone puts the finished thing into a cardboard sleeve, goes into a carton, and then it finds its way to Harvey Norman. So next time you buy a Canbrook power board, you'll know that that's where it comes from. So I walk up to that table and I say, how are things going, guys? One guy says, same old boring stuff happening, Kim. We sit here like third world slaves putting these things together. And it's true. One of the workshops at Bathurst Jail made modem cables. And you know where we sent them to? China. How about that? One guy says, same old boring stuff happening, Kim. We sit here like third world slaves putting these things together. Every day the same. Muster out of the wing. Muster is marking the roll. The people go through a gate, they do a roll call, and they'd be mustered 6 or 7 times a day to make sure no one escapes. Muster out of the wing, muster into the workshops, assemble power boards, muster for lunch, eat sandwiches made yesterday, assemble power boards, muster out of the workshop, muster into the wing, head to the showers, there's no hot water left, then reheated prison food. Sounds pretty grim, mate, I say. How are you coping with it all? Mostly okay. That's what life's all about, eh? 4 years I'm in here, 1 year down, 3 to go. I'm not expecting it to get better. You've got to lower your expectations in this life. Keep your expectations low, you'll never be disappointed. Take it all on the chin. Tough it out, see it through. Do the crime, do the time. You know what I mean? These guys are the Epicureans and the Stoics. One of them has found a way to get pleasure through the little storm he's in, and the other guy is going to tough it out. And I've been spending my time in 20 years of prison chaplaincy with guys like this. One guy sees that life hands him tough times, and he finds ways to get some happiness and satisfaction through it. Now, he's not out there driving a Ferrari and eating caviar, but he's found a way of overcoming the storm of life that he's living in, and he makes moments of happiness for himself and for those around about him. And me, listening to the story, and now, years later, you. The other guy sees doom and gloom, but he's found a way of surviving so it doesn't beat him down. Keep your expectations low. Don't get attached to wants and desires. Remain neutral through it all. Don't let it move you to despair. Take things as they come, and you'll get to the end when the end gets to you. These guys are doing the meat pie and the sausage roll thing in real life. The shape of the pastry is different for each one, but the toughness of life inside is the same for them both. It's not only the philosophers of Mars Hill in Athens who think their way through these issues. Up on Mars Hill, they were comfortable enough. They could spend their life all day talking through philosophies. Guys in prison are in the middle of a whirlpool. Whether we see the world through the eyes of high-sounding philosophies or through metaphors about meat pies and sausage rolls, welcome to life. So we've worked out by now that Paul definitely didn't say anything about meat pies and sausage rolls to those guys. But seeing these philosophies in these metaphors gives us an insight as to how normal people think through the same problems of life without having to go deep into the thinking process and read books of deep philosophy. So what did Paul say? Well, he said two things. The first thing he did was to say what came from his own historical background, the writings of his own people. God created everything. He's the God of heaven and earth. He populated the world. He brought Jesus in, and one day he will judge. But then he went very left field. He said, "Men of Athens, I see that in every way you are very religious." Now, remember I said that neither the Epicureans nor the Stoics had a place for God in their thinking. So that comment was very out of place. And these philosophers would have thought, no, we're not. We remain detached from all that. Paul continues, "I walk around your city and I see many statues and idols. It looks like every possibility is covered. But there is one altar I saw with no statue. And the inscription says, to an unknown God, and that is who I'm here to tell you about." So he set out his basic thoughts of God in creation and redemption. And then he says something to get them on side. He says, God is not very far from any of us. For in him we live and move and have our being. And then, this is the sort of the uppercut, even some of your own poets have said, we are his offspring. He's actually quoting two poets that happened, probably writing 300 or 400 years before the time that Paul was speaking. And he's quoting them. What sort of education does this man have that he can dig back? He speaks first of his own past through the Hebrew scriptures, and then he speaks to them of their own past through the poets and the philosophers of their environment. We are his offspring. Paul shows that he's broadly educated, even of the ancient poets of this other culture of Greek thought. He takes the writings of the ancient philosophers and he reminds the people who he's talking to that even their own writings have given hints of the God that Paul is preaching about. He's saying, look back into your own life and you will see glimmers of what I'm here to announce. Paul speaks their language. He's not trying to argue against them. They can do enough of that of themselves. They got time, they're wealthy enough, they can sit around in the sun arguing with each other. Rather than resist, he joins them. He digs into their own background and he comes up with their own words to support his preaching. There was something in the message of Jesus that was hidden deep in their own scholarly works. And now we return to the book. Thank you, Neville. The last slide here. There we go. In 1965, this guy, he's got a real name, by the way, and I totally forget who it is. This guy taught us how to listen to ourselves. That's what made the book funny. And if you open pages of the book and you read through, like there's some examples at the top. And if you open the book and read through and you read it and into your head and you think, well, what the heck does that mean? But if you say it out loud with a bit of an Aussie accent, then you can see, oh, now I know what he's saying, mate. See, we always thought we spoke English in Australia. Well, And this guy said, you need to listen to yourself. And that's what Paul was saying to the philosophers. You need to listen to yourself. You need to understand what's really underneath what you are saying. We can take rid of that. We can finish with the thing now. Thanks, Neville, because that guy is going to upstage me by looking smarter than I am. The result of this encounter, where Paul said, you guys need to listen to yourself. The result of that encounter was very different from what happened in Thessalonica. In place of resistance, which is what happened back there, and the threat of violence that he received, these Athenians said they wanted to hear more. Some of those who heard Paul became believers. One of them was a member of the council, one of the Areopagus officials, started at the top. And as many other places, he mentions there's a woman who became a follower, even gives us a name, Damaris. So, where are we now? Many people in this room have been in some storm in life and not know how to handle it. Some people will tell you to take care and stay safe. I've seen people sign off their emails with TCSS, take care, stay safe, as if it's some formal farewell. It's sort of a bit like saying love you, which is we're done with love you. And so we put TCSS, take care, stay safe. And the next one we're going to start doing is TLDR, which stands for too long, didn't read. Which, now that you know it exists, you will see it. Take care, stay safe, as if that's some kind of farewell blessing. That's the Epicurean way of saying good things are always good things. We kind of got to find our own way. If someone's saying take care, as if we've got to do that for ourselves. Aren't you going to take care of me? I'm the one in the storm. Others might tell you, get over it. You're in a tough time. People here been in a tough time. Someone said the get over it kind of thing. Walk away, let it go. Get over it is a bit abrupt. Let it go. This makes it sound like you care. That's the Stoics saying that a bad patch of life is not the whole story. Yeah. Not meant to be abusive or anything. It's just saying this is not the whole story. Yeah. Very good. Maybe somebody sat and listened to you in a dark time, and somewhere in the conversation there was a glimmer of hope from inside, some memory of something that got you thinking about whether God cared for you or not. And if that was you, welcome to the Mars Hill experience. This is the place where people find hope instead of fancy philosophies. They find the presence of Jesus like a little spark in the darkness. And sometimes that's all it takes, just that little spark. And those guys at the Areopagus, they say to Paul, we want to hear more. One day, perhaps you will find yourself talking with somebody who's going through a dark place in life. And you'll find yourself asking, did you ever wonder if God cares? Did you ever wonder that sometime through your life? That might be a better response to say, well, God loves you, take care, as you walk away. Brilliant. And if that happens to you, if you find yourself saying, was there a time when God seemed real or seemed caring or seemed important? If that happens to you, welcome to Mars Hill, where God's messengers say something so simple that they can't believe it'll do any good. But somehow the life and the light of Jesus is brought into that person's experience. Well, now it's time I finished up. So let's close with a prayer. Heavenly Father, you are the giver of all good gifts. And your greatest gift to us is the life of Christ within us. So I pray, Lord, that you will give us wisdom to seek that out in others, to see it within ourselves. And if we're sharing anything of you, make it the most important thing that we can share is the light of Christ in our lives, in whose name we pray. Amen.